think it's important to be relevant, and not relevant anymore when we go and do something else.
Very good, thank you. Does anyone need a little clarification from Andre? That was very eloquent and beautifully vivid. All right. Okay. Marcel, the Good Energies Foundation derives from a very successful business, and you're taking a very targeted approach to poverty alleviation through mitigating climate change. Can you give us a thumbnail sketch of what you view as your most promising project to date and why it appears that way? You're part of this new generation of successful businessmen coming into our world.
Thank you. When I started Good Energies in 2001, I wanted to have the most idealistic company, and you can start with a blank sheet of paper. I put down as first word profit. People always wonder, and it's very simple. Unless you're profitable, you will not be funded, or unless you have the prospect of becoming profitable. Now, I also said it should be something about the environment, and it should have a social aspect. So today what it says, triple bottom line, 3 Ps, people plan a profit. And my family colleagues then said, well, Marcel, before you can set up a foundation, you first need to earn some money. It's not like a government that can raise taxes once they've overspent. So after the first 2 IPOs in 2005 and 2006 in the solar business, it was regarded as a kind of retained, unrealized gains. And I was allowed to start. So given that we were in the solar business, it was easy to go for rural electrification to alleviate poverty, since there's a high correlation between access to energy and prosperity. 2 years later, I was in Greenland and saw what happens when we have 3.5 degrees Celsius increase to Greenland. What happens to the life of the people, what happens to the release of glacier, which moved twice as fast within 10 years, what happened to the sledge-dogs, and I came to realize with the group we were there that if things continue on the best case scenario of the IPCC of 2 degrees increase, then that would result in roughly 750 million people going to be environmentally displaced by the end of this century. So I thought, well, the solar panels were not going to solve this. So we rethought the purpose of the foundation and thought, how can you, with very little means, be most effective? And of course, within the area where you understand a little bit from. So it's not politics for me. It's not endless discussions. It's more the pragmatic approach, getting things done and moving fast and scaling things. So looking at the space, it became very quickly clear that it had to do something with reforestation. The only problem then is when you look around, you see lots of people going around with a hat to get some donations to do reforestation. And there are lots of good projects where people do 1 million trees, but then you say this is not scalable. This is not the basis to get where we need to go. And if we take the bond challenge, okay, I'll wrap up very quickly. So basically, we decided to go to reforestation, but then the commercial way. In that, I came to see or to find a sugar palm project, which has all properties of being a social project, being an environmental project, and a commercial project. And we're pursuing that right now in Indonesia. Due diligence has started, and we hope to close by the end of this year. Thank you.
I had the great pleasure to spend most of the afternoon with Marcel yesterday and see photos from this project. It's fascinating. Anyone have a clarifying question for Marcel? All right. We will get to the questions of business acumen and how it changes the world of philanthropy a bit later, but we'll pull some more thoughts from you on that. Adam, Synchronicity Earth, which you began with your wife and partner been on a fascinating journey. And can you describe how your philosophy of grant making has evolved? Because again, you have been on the trip of evolution, and how it fits within the philanthropic community. Are you a pioneer, or are you an outlier?
We'll do the second question first. Pithy is not my strong point, so I'm sure we cut off. I'd probably say the best definition I've heard of being a pioneer is those are the people with arrows in their back. So under that definition, I'd have to go with pioneer. As you said, it's been a long journey. I grew up in South Africa. I was very exposed to two things: extreme injustice and nature. And then became a fund manager, and I'm very fascinated with markets and how they operate, and also the abstraction of markets and how they can create things out of nothing. Taking all these different interests and real curiosity, my partners agreed to allow me to set up a hedge fund of funds with management fees funded the foundation. So I was now in the luxury of having an entity that had annuity income where Jessica and I could set up a foundation and have the freedom of the foundation to give money to projects that we're passionate about or we thought about. And that fund grew slowly over time with more money to give away to projects. And we did everything. I mean, we did art, we did health, we did microfinance, we did a football stadium in a small town in South America. It was just an incredible learning curve and lots of mistakes and lots of things. And while doing that 10-year process, we started seeing two things. One, the environmental sector is incredibly underfunded. The other one is that everything starts interconnecting. So what's the point of doing antiretrovirals if they don't work because there's no fresh vegetables and water? So we're giving money to an organization doing urban greening in a township in South Africa. Is that focused on environmental? Is that human? And this whole boxing thing didn't really work. The other thing is, what I need to understand in my job is where's the opportunity and how to best use leverage. And what I realized was that the conservation industry, we'll just call it that, is sort of where the hedge fund industry was about 18 years ago. And that's when we started our business. And I thought there'd be much more leverage. Instead of using the money to give to projects, we should use the money to set up a charity where we actually create the infrastructure to do research, package product by the philanthropists, and market the idea. And it's very complicated. Selling the idea of a school, building a school somewhere, helping a kid who needs food, it's very easy to sell. It's a very simple project. Selling the idea that the oceans need help, it's exceptionally complicated. What do? Okay, you do marine protected reserve, but where, with who? Deep sea, or the complexity is huge. So what we set about doing is trying to replicate what I do in my day job for this, create that same service for potential donors. So you're going out there and you're trying to, in the UK, 3 to 4% of giving goes to the environment. Let's get market share. How do you get it to 20%? Well, you need to create a clear product, people giving you the money, you actually feel it's going to be effective, and you need to communicate what you're doing is effective, and also you need to actually go and sell the idea that one of the 2 breaths comes from the ocean, and this is important. So when someone's allocating their capital, maybe they know to give it to the opera house, and they give it to save the oceans. And I think the one thing that shifted is just managed to a very bottoms-up approach, just to meet an amazing person and be inspired by what they were doing. Wouldn't really compare it and say, okay, that's great, you're a great rhino person. We wouldn't say, well, there are 170 people doing rhino stuff. Let's evaluate the other 170 and actually find out who's the best rhino person, or maybe we should give it to meerkats, or maybe we should give it to dolphins. So I think that kind of thinking is definitely evolved in our process.
Very good. Clarification? Question? Yes, Andre.
Yes. Just one point. Yes, philanthropy has to do with distributing money in that context. And in my experience, there are 3 real things which people are interested in: education, the arts. Sorry, I exclude religion because you're obviously. education, the arts, and health. Why? Because the human being is confronted with the issue at some stage. I mean, you never see your children, you want to send them to the university, you give to education, the same with health, the same with arts. How can we bring conservation to this capital choice? I think that's what you were trying to explain at your personal journey, and I'd be very interested to see what advice you could give to those to bring them along the same path.
I think it's being open and honest and exposing people. You know, stand up and I'm a 41-year-old male, hedge fund manager, and I love animals. You know, this is why. Like actually just being open about it and then trying to explain the reasons why. You might find other people that they don't really want to admit it. And also explain, you sort of get, you all got these false boundaries that you create. Like, even you see it here, you know, can nature serve us? You know, this idea that we're totally separate from nature and that we're always making these choices. You feel, you know, even while I was here, you know, amazing AIDS project in South Africa, you know, we used to support. We supported, sent an emergency, we need this help on something. And then, you know, to send a meal back and say, sorry, I'm helping a slender loris or a frog, you know, it's very difficult for funders to, there's a huge peer pressure to actually say, well, you know, I want to help. I actually think the intrinsic life of the frog is valuable. And 7 billion people on Earth, and philanthropists are being forced into supporting that. But I think, you know, I thought there was this conspiracy theory where at the age of 40, I learned that 1 out of 2 breaths comes from the oceans thanks to Sylvia Earle. I was like, how did I get choked up knowing that? I really thought that everyone was trying to keep this information from me, all know about forests. But if you frame it in that way, all of a sudden it's like, hang on a sec, you know, I like to breathe. You know, half my lungs actually belong to, you know, comes from the ocean. Then it shifts. And I think, you know, for me, I'm a very curious person. I think that's what drives me probably more than altruism. And my own journey, you know, I'm starting to realize, hang on a sec, we're not totally separate from nature. And actually nature fits into those boxes because of that.
Very good. I have a feeling that's going to elicit some questions from the audience as we go on too. Thanks. Fred, you know, we're in a time when most foundations choose to focus on very specific regions, and it's exciting that the Species Conservation Fund is truly global and is open to applications for funding support from conservationists based in all parts of the world. And you'll potentially support projects focused on any and all kinds of plant, animal, and fungus species. How does this focus relate to what appears to be a trend in the support of conservation science that's beyond the individual hero and towards more systems-based support?
I think Adam and Andre already mentioned one aspect, is that foundations are very individually driven. So you should remember that an individual are at the core and behind. And very often system-based approach requires solutions which are, for an individual, very difficult to fathom, to see how as an individual you can have an impact. And it doesn't matter how influential you are, or the size of your foundation is very difficult. You need to find a way where an individual has a feeling that you can have an impact. And system-based approach requires solutions which are such as integrated management, changing policies, institutional reorganization, which are very, very difficult to address from an individual point of view. So that's the first point. The second point is that species, because we are focused on species of any kind, anywhere, are actually very often threatened at a very local level. And the actions required are actually very grassroots. They are very local, they are very specific to a particular locality, and they don't necessarily require a lot of fund, but they need to be there at the right time, at the right place. And most of the action needs to be immediate, very quick. We don't have the luxury to wait for nations to agree on a declaration like in Rio for several years before we can act on select individual species or group or population. So that's the second, our second pitch. The third one is that species conservation requires people, and people in the field, especially in developing countries. And it's increasingly difficult for young aspiring biologists or conservation biologists to find the first support that will really encourage them to continue their career in species conservation. So that basically we feel that our approach, our focus, because we think we are focused, is actually complementing the system-based approach by actually answering individual willingness to act and demonstrating that the individual can act, is answering immediate concern for species and preparing the next generation of young conservation that will be required one day to actually implement the system-based solution that we're advocating.
Thank you. I got so wrapped up in what he was saying, I didn't even time him.
I think that was good.
Ken, I think you have a question.
So one of the challenges of this incredible openness that you have to all species everywhere is that you presumably receive a very large number of applications about all kinds of places and all kinds of species, and that must overwhelm the other approach of saying we're going to only work on amphibians and we're going to work in this country. You can have a great deal of expertise. So about that one thing. So you must have a wonderful tension as you try to work out among the many thousands of applications we have. How do you manage to be so open?
I think we've got first, as you said, we've got a very large number of applications. I mean, the fund is quite young. I mean, it was launched in 2008 in the IUCN Congress in Barcelona. We have received well over 3,000 applications around that time. And we basically set up a panel of experts which are actually looking in their individual capacity, not in their institutional capacity, to review things. We look at very simple criteria on which we obviously have to make choice. And we specifically targeted small amount of money, which our strategy is to spread wide and to very often act as either the first funder at a very small level, and we realize that the potential of having a small grant and the ability to then for the applicant to leverage more additional substantial grant in other donor organizations or other foundations is actually greatly enhanced. And we are trying to find always some partial funding. So we really very often complement fund where a lot of organizations, for whatever reason, cannot fund, let's say, salary for guards or anti-poaching patrol or equipment or these kind of things. We complement that, and I think we can do that because we've got people which are in our panel which are very pragmatic species conservation people who know the reality of the ground.
This is a perfect segue to our question for Jessica. The New England Biolabs Foundation, it has chosen very specifically to fund grassroots organizations. The typical grant size is $3,000 to $9,000. And how do you magnify your impact beyond the dollars? And do you see this trend for funding grassroots organizations strengthening or ebbing?
Right. Well, thank you, Lynn, for that question. And first of all, just to say I see tremendous overlap, Fred, with your approach and ours in terms of small grants being the startup funder, looking for opportunities to complement. But yes, I really think that trend is increasing. You see it with organizations like Global Green Grants Fund. I'm proud with New England Biolabs Foundation. I'm, by the way, new to the foundation. I only started in 2009. I'm new to philanthropy. I came from 20 years of being in the nonprofit world and being on the fund-seeking side of the equation. So this is a learning curve for me. But so going back to the 80s when New England Biolabs Foundation was created, our founder had a very simple, but I think really visionary premise, and that was that if you put small amounts of money in the hands of organizations and community associations that were closest to the biodiversity, closest to the natural resource, you could have an impact. And I think now more and more foundations are increasing their comfort level in that way. And so when I walked in 2009, we had that lovely premise. We had grown geographically. Every year we'd add another country to where we were working, so that by the time I got there with the tiny endowment we had, we were stretched way too thin. My challenge has been to try to guide my board. It's essentially a hybrid, but a little bit of a family foundation, to guide my board in trying to be more strategic and focused. And so we articulated a mission statement focused on stewardship, community-based stewardship of landscape and seascape and biocultural diversity. And we've moved along from there. So to the second point of how do you maximize impact? And of course, I was faced with that quite directly because I accepted the job in June 2008, and I started the job in January 2009, and everybody remembers what happened in the fall of 2008. So our endowment had gone from, let's just say, X to X minus 40%. When I started my job. And so the first thing, of course, is to try to save money. We moved into donated office space so that we could save essentially a few grants worth of money that we could put into grant making. But obviously, I think you can't solve it all by grant making. You can have a bigger impact in two